Could you talk about more what companies should focus on?
Absolutely. In the general or traditional view of supply chain, especially in a global supply chain, in the supply chain of the last 40, 50 years, the usual or normal way of operations where you're really applying as much automation or insight or trying to get insight into is often around the planning and supplier network. What you're trying to do in supply chain, you're looking for some version of predictability. You want to make sure that I'm going to be able to build my widget with the inputs that I require from your company and that company, often just in time, so I have the least amount of waste, right? The other thing that they often look at is resiliency. So these companies, especially larger companies, who rely on many, many vendors for their inputs, will often look at some way of ensuring that if your company can no longer deliver to me some raw material, I have an opportunity to go to another company, or I already have the contract in place with another company that allows me to source those materials elsewhere. And then that sort of leads into the last point, which is really all about exposure to disruption. So as you can imagine, when COVID hit, a lot of businesses basically went to almost zero production. It disrupted a large amount of the supply chain of the world. And you have raw inputs coming from all over the world, generally going to somewhere like China or somewhere in, Southeast Asia or South Asia to be assembled and then moved around the world and all this stuff. Some of those raw materials were either missing or the value added by middle companies wasn't there, so the raw material didn't make it into the specific place you needed it to build your product. And that's something we've seen in the auto world. We've seen that a lot. The chip manufacturing has slowed down, and then demand came back, and it was like at a massive roar. And because we're in a world where everything is computerized and digital, just about everything needs those chips, and car makers are some of the biggest users. I mean, your AC has several chips, your entertainment control system has several chips, so everything has a bunch of chips. Even like the way you move your seat up and down, if it's electric, has chips. So cars were being shipped with features that were sort of turned off because of the chip problem and the chip supply chain problem.
Delays.
That's right, lots of delays. And I'm sure you've read, and many people have read, stories where some car is actually sold and received by the end consumer, and they're told, when we get the chip, we'll turn on that feature then. So that's how disruptive supply chain issues can be. And having an eye to all of your vendors and the promises that you have is very crucial to all of this, like very typical overview of your supply chain network, right? And to have that sort of overview or view of everything that you need to see, you really need to be reading all of the documents that you receive from your vendors and that you send out to your clients. And I mean, really, the systems to do that are things like Zenith and Apogee, where you can extract all of this intelligence from all of those procurement and invoicing and agreement documents that you have, and build a full picture of the whole thing and give you much better visibility into any vulnerability you may have in supply chain, is typical or not. If you digitize them and put them into a database, you can then run much more involved machine learning models to actually understand where you're exposed. Understanding where you're exposed is really the whole purpose of this, is really knowing your vulnerabilities, right?
Absolutely. Getting a head start.
That's right.
Right.